with the ACT. Maybe someday you'll be famous enough to have some kind of model or chart named after you, and we'll be doing the karate pie chart. Paradigm. Emmy remembers my famous diagram. Emmy does not remember my famous diagram, nor do you.
What's your famous diagram?
What, cereal?
I did have cereal today. You don't remember the cane tree?
Oh, was that like
I
the
can
tree
honestly
that
tell
you
like,
that.
yeah, I do remember that. I still have it in
You just wait.
I burn all
Sorry.
The cane tree will be coming your way.
Oh, I remember you used to make us fill out those,
I also
bacon.
yeah, it's a
That's not the cane tree. Draw yourself a little picture, but give yourself some room to add on to it a little bit later on. I'll zoom in so that we can kind of see each part. But we're going to have one part, data, evidence, grounds, is going to lead into warrant and reasoning. This is like a very dramatic 10-second delay from what I do on my iPad to what happens on the screen. And then warrant and reasoning, I'll zoom back out. And then warrant and reasoning is going to lead into claim. Give yourself some room, though, above and below, because we'll be adding some things to it a little bit later.
That's a lot to ask. I'll just do below and then
Well, it doesn't work that way.
below.
So data, evidence, grounds, and these are interchangeable. Warrant, reasoning, also interchangeable, lead to a claim. Stephen A. Toulmin had a philosophy background, as well as an argument background. But philosophy, communication, rhetoric, those things go together. Also a scientific background. I think that the Toulmin model ends up being more scientific in the setup of it as compared to the way that it actually gets kind of carried out. His argument would be that you accumulate data, you accumulate evidence, you take a look at the data and the evidence, you analyze the results, and that leads to a claim. It's kind of like more like a scientific hypothesis where, okay, let's do a whole bunch of studies, let's see what happens, and then that will decide how we end up formulating our opinion. Truth be told, when it comes to an argument that's taking place, and like smart debates would be an example of this, at no fault of your own, we probably do this in reverse order. Shower at night, shower in the morning. By golly, I prefer a shower at night.
Yep.
Now I need to figure out why I prefer a shower at night. Or this is why Velcro ends up kind of being better than laces. We tend to take an opinion and then we kind of look for things to support it. His argument would be that really in a proper setup, you should accumulate evidence or make observations, and then that's going to lead to some reasoning which will kind of come to a claim. I can't say that therefore you must kind of switch the way you go about things. It's natural for us to start with a claim and kind of move our way back. I would say that should you start with a claim, an opinion, an argument, and you are collecting data and evidence, it is important that you don't only look at data and evidence that is going to be in direct support of your argument, but you look as much data evidence as you can to come up with, all right, how valid really does my argument end up being? But his setup would be, start with your evidence, and then you kind of progress your way towards what your overall claim is going to be. Claim, and I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise, it's the point that you're trying to make. It's essentially like the equivalent of your thesis statement, if this was going to be more of an argumentative essay, but it's that proposition or that assertion that you want another person to accept. So it kind of would answer that question, what's the point? The one on here is pretty basic. You should buy your brother a birthday present because he bought one for you. Claim, we were talking about at the end of the period yesterday with Colleen Winke, what is her argument, what is her claim? Well, one of them was that schools place too much emphasis on grades and not enough emphasis on the actual acquisition of knowledge or learning. So claims can be simplistic in nature, they can certainly become much more complex. We should not have a cancellation tomorrow. Would be a claim.
I don't know how I feel about that at this point. I'd be okay with
The
it.
first makeup day is the day after your
But
I
also-
don't That sucks for you, but I don't know.
Yeah.
No, they're moving junior college.
A claim could be Emmy has no empathy for anyone. And then we could come up with evidence. Emmy just said, I don't care.
Yeah, if there's school tomorrow, I'm still.
That's
Alright, Emmy.
Talk to me tomorrow. Or Emmy only.
The kind of quiz where like if you
CHS
miss
quiz.
it, you can't make it up. And
Correct.
I
it's
don't
really
know.
downfall.
I need
If you missed
$1,000
And-
to go to school.
Emmy, this isn't NA. This is CHS. We still wait our grades. So
$1,000
it's gonna count
to
a
go to
lot.
school.
I mean,
I don't
if you
know.
take the day off, it doesn't mean you're gonna get this.
All I have to do is submit a video of
In
myself.
Emmy's world, it does. So let her enjoy it. All right. 3 types of claims exist. And again, we'll take a look at all of them here. You have a fact-based claim. So this is going to be looking at something that you can essentially verify, that you can prove. Weather would be pretty good. Not so far as predicting it, but like what happened. It was cold yesterday. Actually, yesterday wasn't bad. It was sunny and fairly pleasant yesterday. Bless you.
Is it said that?
How do you
42
know?
degrees
Well,
is
it was a 40-degree sunny day at 3 p.m. Pardon?
Is it? That's kind of sad that 40 degrees is a pleasant day. For us.
Toward the end of January, it's pretty
In
pleasant.
Pittsburgh, yeah.
In Pittsburgh, yes. No, if you were in Punta Cana, you'd be going by, golly, this is terrible. I've said by golly twice. My uncle, who lives in Pasadena, wears flannel should it get below 75 degrees. 'Cause, yeah,
That's gotta be so hot.
oh, but for him, he's freezing.
That's room temperature.
So for a fact-based claim, it can be a little tricky depending upon how it's worded, because you have to prove it. It's not an argument so far as being an opinion, but it's something that you have to prove. So if you were to go, schools emphasize grades over learning, you can't argue this is why they should emphasize grades over learning or vice versa, but you would have the responsibility to prove that they do emphasize grades over learning. Not saying it's an argument that's impossible to prove, but it does make it a little bit trickier because it's not opinion-based. One that people tend to be more positive about would be judgment or value. This is when you have claims that are going to be involving opinions, attitudes, and that are very subjective. So Emmy would be arguing there should be a cancellation tomorrow for her own personal benefit. The key word as to how you know it's a judgment or a value claim, well, not even that kind of added on to it. But to make it a judgment or a value, school should be canceled. If you see the word should, you're dealing with a judgment value claim. And you can also tell within an argument that that's what the claim is. Mr. Kane should make homework optional. As opposed to a fact-based claim would be Mr. Kane's class, students would perform better if homework were not a requirement. That would be the difference between fact-based and going schools should not assign homework, or at least make it a requirement. Policy would be where you're advocating for a specific course of action. So this would be something like in Student Congress, beginning in the 2019-2020 school year, North Hills School District will no longer assign mandatory homework assignments. That would be a policy claim that you would be making. So you could certainly have a lot of carryover, among the 3. Policy, you're looking to enact something, so it's more like a Congress legislative body. If you're doing judgment value, you're kind of talking about opinions, attitudes about things, and then if it's going to be fact, you are proving that this happened. One's not necessarily better than the other. One might be more appropriate depending upon what kind of audience you're dealing with or what the assignment may be. Grounds, this is going to be the proof or the evidence that the arguer is going to be using. So this is going to kind of take care of the question of what is your proof, how come, why, how do you know, all that kind of stuff. You're certainly not limited to these things, but grounds can consist of statistics, quotations, could be reports, findings, studies, could be physical evidence, or various forms of reasoning. That was a brutal basketball game. How do you know? Julia has a black eye. Could be a form of physical evidence from it. It hurts every time Mr. King sits down.
Is that what happened
Physical
today?
evidence. No, I think it's more from yesterday. I did lunches yesterday.
I
What
saw
a
you
dumb
limping to the
idea.
classroom this morning.
What?
I saw you limping to the classroom with your shirt.
Wasn't limping.
It was more like a walk.
Stretching. Yeah. Today or yesterday.
It was today.
It was
You had
today,
your
yeah.
shirt in your hand.
Yeah.
It's simple.
Did you guys win today at least?
Nope. It was bad all around.
What was the score?
Actually, the good news was I did not pull my groin. I thought for a second I did, but
Did you
good.
An intense stretch.
There was definitely leg got stuck. The other foot went another way. It was, yeah.
Never heard
I'm not very flexible. That's my one weakness in the world, Jenna, that I think about.
Your one
That's
weakness.
the only problem with me. I think I'm perfect in every other way.
I thought you weren't good at math.
What?
I thought you said you weren't good at math.
No, I'm excellent at that.
That's facts.
He just he flipped a coin which major he would go into when it went
Pickle.
What's with these boxes? You said writing the boxes are really one MS.
Oh, we'll come back to it later.
Ah.
Like, we're gonna add on to that chart. That's why I said about leaving some
Oh,
space
I've
for it.
been writing it.
I hate it when you say that.
Sorry.
Dude.
So, with the types of. What have you been doing?
I've been writing.
Well, you don't need to write all of it.
Okay,
Do you know
well,
how
I've
to
been
take
writing
notes? Taking notes means paraphrasing.
You know what, Ben? Did I ask for your opinion?
You gotta start most of
And
teaching.
Sage's argumentation.
Didn't you learn shorthand? They stopped
No.
teaching that like in the 50s.
What's that?
Yeah, we're good. Okay.
It's like a way to write faster.
Yeah.
We're good.
So like 1950 secretaries would be writing.
That's also how like waiters and waitresses write.
My mom was doing
You just abbreviate.
But it's a standard abbreviation, which I can't, like, it looks like hieroglyphics. My one aunt did a shorthand, and she was like, yeah, I
We
can't
should do like
follow
how
it.
waitresses are like
Load maintenance.
All right. It looks like rain barometer is falling. The fact that the barometer is falling, you have some physical evidence that you are taking a look at. Even though it might not be something along the lines of a black eye, you have actual physical evidence where I can take a look at the barometer. That's leading me to my claim that it looks like it is going to rain. If I take a look at the other one, the other Applebee's restaurants I've been in have had clean restrooms, so I'll bet this one has clean restrooms too. I'm making a claim, I'm making an assumption, but I'm basing this essentially from experience that I have. Again, evidence, data that they've been clean at other ones, so I'm going to assume this one's going to be clean as well. You gotta live. Much like you can have different types of claims with judgment, fact, and also policy, you can have grounds based on various things. Primary one that we tend to look at is going to be evidence in the sense that it's something that you can verify with facts, statistics, reports, physical proof like the barometer. You could also do something such as source credibility, authorities, experts, celebrity endorsers, close friends, someone else to say so. Tomorrow is January the 30th. Tomorrow for juniors is when scheduling window opens up. So you could have a judgment claim that you should take this class, certain specific class. Why should I take it? Oh, well, my friend said it was good. That would be an example of source credibility, personal friend, maybe a teacher, someone who you trust so far as the class process telling you which kind of class you should take would be source credibility. A lot of times we'll also do things when it comes to analysis and reasons where you have more of a logic that's being offered as a proof, as evidence. So, one of my favorite phone calls one year was Emmy didn't get the scholarship. Not Emmy, but we'll say the name Emmy. Emmy didn't get the scholarship to Notre Dame. Emmy had a B+ in AP English.
That's why.
I didn't know.
So,
the reason she did it.
yep,
You are.
It's
you
all
cost
over
my
site.
daughter $40,000.
How dare you?
How dare you?
$40,000.
By golly.
It was like $10,000. I don't think I went by golly on that. I just hung up after a little while. But there was, so far as the evidence, it was analysis and reasoning. She did not get the scholarship. She really needs the scholarship or really wants the scholarship. Her lowest grade on her report card was her English grade. Actually, I don't think it was a B+. I think we only had B's back then. This was going way back. Therefore, that would be the reason as to why she did not get the scholarship. So it must be my fault.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because so is that like
You're the one who made her perform that.
all Ticonderogas are pencils, but not all pencils are Ticonderoga argument?
A 91. I still remember.
Or it's like all Fords are cars, but not all
A
cars.
circle, or is like a square is a rectangle.
Exactly.
Well, how so then with like the art, like,
Well, isn't that, aren't you trying to like
couldn't you like weasel your way into saying stuff like that? Like, so blank is a blank, so must be blank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like one, this is true, therefore, yeah. It ends up, there's going to be, starting on Thursday and Friday, we're going to look at a lot more fallacies. And there'll be some examples of, that kind of, it all depends upon how the wording is taking place. It could be something as simple as it's just an absurd argument, more likely non sequitur, but it kind of depends how you're setting up as to why one thing is true versus the other. Warrant's reasoning. Here's the thing that folks can sometimes struggle with. Warrant, generally speaking, tends to be an inferential leap. Notice with inferential, root word is going to be infer. To infer is to... So I mean if you infer something.
It's an educated guess.
You guess. You assume in an educated format. So it is an educated guess. It's an educated leap that connects the claim with the grounds. It's inferred because it tends to be implicit or unstated. So, Mom, I can't go to school today. Why? I have a fever of 103. Okay.
Isn't it a form?
Your claim is I can't go to school today. Your grounds is I have a fever of 103. The warrant and reasoning was not offered, was not verbalized, but it was understood that that's a fairly high fever. Fever could be contagious. You could get other people sick. There might be some other symptoms that are going to ensue. You might have the flu. By golly, we don't want Emma to get the flu. Thank you.
I'm keeping a tally.
Well, I was purposely using it now.
Thank you.
So you're providing a grounds is kind of being inferred. So this requires the listener to kind of recognize the underlying reasoning that makes sense as to how that claim is going to connect to the grounds because it ends up linking it. What can be problematic is you're presenting an argument that people are unfamiliar with. Well, at that point, you can't really rely on an unstated grounds, but you have to make that argument very clearly understood, the logic, the reasoning that you're going with. It's not that you have to go, okay, Crystal, fevers are bad, so if it's 103, you really need to make sure you stay home. That's something that she's going to be able to grasp, but if you're talking about, whatever someone's wheelhouse is so far as, economics, and you're talking to a person who doesn't quite follow GDP and all that kind of stuff, you'll probably have to provide some background information about it. If you are watching like a sporting event and the person next to you has no idea of what's going on, you have to explain things in more layman's terms because they're not going to pick up on it quite right away. If Grant were to start talking to me about his wonderful, what's your instrument of choice? Yeah, whatever. He's going to have to do a lot more explanation about, well, you have to do this. Yeah, I don't know. All I know is Sadie's going to play the cello. I told her yesterday. I think she was not happy about it. No, switch to the cello, and here's why. The viola still makes sense because not as many people play the viola,
Yes,
but you get stuck in the middle. No one sees you.
Exactly.
I'm the middle. I'm
The cello is also the
the
Cello.
are by far the worst players.
And you
in
get
the
to sit
orchestra,
down.
and
In
we're
her middle
roosted.
school,
Nobody gonna address that? Okay.
which she is like 4 years away from attending,
What happens?
there's only 4 cello players.
Cello is hard.
It's not
Yeah,
hard.
It's
we're not gonna do that now.
It is PME and it's very competitive. Like,
I'm not worried about PMEA.
It's because
Is
they're
that the
all
game
okay.
about that?
And
What
they-
if we just like take
the
those
cello
cellos
is
out?
ESO.
What?
That's revolutionary, I know.
I am.
No, we don't do that.
She's not in your lucky.
I wasn't PMEA. Yes. You dummy.
Now, I would say when it came to spar debates, listen up. When it came to spar debates, we did a pretty nice job, with Warren. If you were to kind of make an analogy so far as like an essay that would be going here, your claim would be your thesis statement. Your grounds would essentially be the topics of your body paragraphs. The warrant would be the explanation of your main reasoning back to the thesis. Now again, and hence that analysis kind of idea. Now again, you don't want to make the audience feel, uneducated and stupid essentially by explaining things in an overly simplistic way, but you certainly want to make sure they understand what the connection is between the evidence that you are providing and that overall argument that you were trying to do. Again, warrants can also be based on multiple things. You can go with the general ethos, logos, and pathos. So warrants could deal with the source credibility, the authority. Zach's not here. He was using a lot of ethos when he was making his plea about long-distance relationships. We had Martin Luther King. We had John McCain.
John McCain relationship with America.
And that's why he was.
Wasn't
That's
there-
why he won.
Wasn't there a third one?
There was a lot. There was just a lot.
He brought up a BuzzFeed
Yeah, he
article.
referenced BuzzFeed.
And he brought up another politician I didn't know.
He was the most prepared I've
Yeah.
ever seen. And ridiculously prepared. That dude wrote his
At
entire
that
speech.
point, what do you
So
think John
the
McCain
source
was?
credibility, the fact that I am using people that folks would be familiar with was something that was helping his argument. Reason giving, induction, deduction so far as the argument, but warrants can certainly have, I think this is the one that we'd most likely go with, that there's some logic to it. Emotional appeals, not something that we probably want to use too much when it comes to warrants and reasoning, but it can certainly work. I would say a main one to really kind of consider would be the shared values. And again, not to bring up Katie's defeat over and over and over again,
Just bring it up.
what was a shared value outside of the realm of love and long distance relationships that Zach was kind of playing off of?
Patriotism.
Patriotism.
Which was hilarious. That was
It's-
so
it's-
funny.
It's not first later, so it worked.
No, I know. I'm saying, as the person who he was saying it to, I was like, what do I say to John
Says more
McCain?
about the people that voted for him than,
I was more
The
shaken by
arguments.
the fact that he brought up so many
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how shaken I was when he said, I have a dream. I was like,
Well, his relationship. She's like, that's a country,
The
not
fact
a
that he
person.
somehow tied it to
Right.
a dream.
Hey, we never said what kind of relationship we were going with. I mean, it was inferred that it was, personal related, but
honestly,
relationship
I
with
like
your
it.
nation.
The best quote is Martin Luther King was talking about civil rights, not relationships. She was just
But it's been
Was there
very
a thing
pleasant
with
design.
relationships
Slavery
with-
into
That is really good.
So ethos, pathos, logos, shared values, and those values don't have to be it's not that patriotism's overly complex, but it doesn't have to be even as significant as that. It could be shared value of like fairness, equality. I would say you folks are dealing yesterday when we were talking about academic cheating with shared values so far as pressure, being tired, overworked, things like that. Those are ideas that multiple people could certainly relate to. Again, the categories aren't going to be exclusive to one another. There's certainly going to be a lot of overlap, especially within an extended argument where you'll probably have some shared values, some pathos, maybe more logos, and some ethos to kind of go along with it. So, Muffin is running a temperature. Muffin is, of course, Ben's pet. Something. Tarantula.
Ferrets.
Ferrets, there you go. I'll bet she has an infection. So temperature here is going to be our evidence. Our claim is I bet she has an infection. The warrant is sign reasoning. A fever is a reliable sign of some kind of infection that would be taking place. Generalization being made, that dog is probably friendly. It's a golden retriever. So we have a generalization that most or all golden retrievers are friendly. Since that dog is a golden retriever, it must be friendly too.
all dogs also.
No.
No.
You're not.
Okay, but that's also
There
something
is
is
a
like
German
pit
Shepherd.
bull.
The more
This
the
pit bull
dog
attacks
looks like
somebody,
a
so all
rat.
pit bulls would be
Anyone that was like bit by a dog outside Kara's house.
Nobody said the more dog looks like a
Yeah.
rabbit, unless it's
Do you think Byron likes
So it's
small
Here,
dogs?
okay.
Still,
I hate
Here is what your quiz is going to look like on Friday. This is what your quiz is going to look like on Friday. You are going to have sets of 3 statements. For your 3 statements, you're going to have to identify one as being the data or the evidence, the grounds, one as being the warrant, and one as being the claim. So it's not that you're going to have first sentence in the first set matches up with the third sentence in the fourth set. Each each grouping of 3 goes together. Evidence, warrant, claim. Which one do you think would be the best one to start with of those 3?
Claim.
I would try to identify the claim first. What is the argument that is, essentially being made? First thing that I would do is I'm going to look for a judgment value claim. I want to see if I have the word should showing up anywhere. If I see should, I'm going to zero in, not automatically go that's the claim, but think that very well could be it. I take a look at these first three. I don't have should showing up anywhere. So what do we think our claim is?
Germany is similar to the U.S.
No.
Okay.
The third bullet.
Work sharing will reduce unemployment in the U.S. Nick, were you going there? That is the claim. The argument is work sharing is going to make unemployment, less of a problem in the U.S. What is my evidence to suggest that work sharing will lower unemployment in the United States? Mackenzie? It worked in Germany. So what is the connection? The connection is going to be, since it worked in Germany, Germany is similar to the U.S., I would think that it would then also work in the U.S., hence my claim, work sharing will reduce unemployment in the United States.
So is the warrant reading something that is unsaid, or should you say it in the argument?
It for our purposes, I think it's something that you should include 95% of the time. Because, let's say we were to bring up a topic about work sharing, you might be familiar with it. I bet there's going to be parts of the population, the audience, that are not. And so at that point, I think the reasoning is necessary to understand. If you're talking about, Mr. Tan, I won't be here for Friday's quiz. Why not? I'm in PMEA. Okay. Well, we have a performance on Friday, so that's why I'm not going to be. I don't think you would have to make that explanation to your teacher kind of thing. But for the majority of our arguments, you would want to.
Okay.
Especially if you're talking about, Martin Luther King had a dream that long distance relationships would no longer be doomed to fail. You might want to explain how that goes in. Unless your audience is laughing and supporting in a positive way, then you just let them go with it, because if you explain it, it might not resonate as well. For the second set that we have here, which one would be the claim? You want to try again?
People over 65 are more dangerous drivers.
Okay, so people over 65 are more dangerous drivers. Our evidence that would lead us to believe this, Nicole?
The second bullet.
Number of car accidents for people over 65 is twice that for people who are 18 to 25. So that's why I would be saying that they would be more dangerous. My warrant, what would kind of link those two, obviously I can only go with one now, that the number of driving accidents is an indicator of driving ability. So if you are in more accidents, that would make us think that you have lesser of driving ability. So that's what the setup is going to be for Friday. We still have more stuff that we're going to do tomorrow, because the Toulmin model does get a little bit more complex in some ways that we'll be setting up our argument. But your quiz on Friday will be 12 points. So you will have 4 sets of 3 statements where you'll be identifying data, claim, warrant. We'll do a little bit more practice with this at the beginning of class tomorrow. Then we'll talk about rebuttals, modalities, and all that other kind of fun stuff. And we'll talk about having a grade.
Oh, I don't have any of those.
Yeah. It will happen, whether or not it's easier.